think what's interesting for us is how we're actually bringing artists into this conversation and celebrating this or exploring this issue in a very unique way. So first over, I'm going to hand to the filmmakers, but to show the first film. Thank you.
My name's Olive, I am 16. I've made it to year 11. I finished my first full year of high school last year in year 10, so I was pretty excited about that. I love the water and I love my jumpers. They're warm, they protect me from the outside world. I first noticed that I was a bit different to other kids in year 4 when I had suicidal thoughts. No one really knew about it, so I kept it myself. I think my best friend knew. I would write down and draw my feelings in little books. The thoughts were there for quite a while, and then my mum moved my brother and I up to the country with my grandparents because he was having trouble in school, and I think they just sort of went away when I got up there. There's a lot of space in the country, so that was nice. Just sort of went downhill when I moved back to Sydney. Started high school. It was okay at first, and then everything sort of just got out of control. It was a bit all over the place. I stopped doing a lot of the things that I loved, like going swimming, going outside. Yeah. There were times where I threw apples at my mum. I emptied my room, chucked everything out. Another time when my mum was inside the room, I got this deodorant can and I emptied it. We couldn't breathe and stuff. I was depressed, I was self-harming, and I had plans to kill myself. I can't necessarily distinctly remember it, but it's sort of like you're in a swimming pool and you've got like a bungee rope attached to you and you're swimming but you're not going anywhere. Sort of like you're trying really hard but you're still stuck in the same place. So when I got to 14, we decided that I needed to go to hospital. I was there for 6 weeks and I had this nurse called Jade. I'll always remember the first time my brother was visiting me in hospital. He was a bit apprehensive and I said, if you don't want to be here, just go. And I kicked them out. Jade came up to me and she says, they're here, they care for you, and I will not allow you to kick them out. It was a bit of tough love. They came back in and we played some games and I'll always remember that. There was another time when I got admitted into hospital and I was even more depressed than I was the first time, and I went out with my mum and I said, you just gotta let me go, because I guess for me to be able to go through with it, they would have had to been gone. If I didn't have people there standing beside me, I think there's a huge chance that I wouldn't be here today. I think family is really important. I think it's vital. I moved back up to the country and recently I started to feel like when I was admitted into hospital, my psychiatrist thought it would be best to change my medication. It was quite a quick changeover because I was having all the thoughts again. But this time I had techniques to distract myself from the thoughts, and I just sort of felt myself that I didn't need to listen to them. I had a support network that I knew I could talk to and work through the situation. Today I had an epiphany that wearing big jumpers and daggy clothes, I guess, make me look like I'm really fat. I think for me to be able to move on, I need to let go of them, which is a bit sad because I love my jumpers. And also, I haven't been outside in 4 years, so I'm excited to get back into the water, muck around with my family and my friends. If I got the chance to say something to someone who was going through what I have been through and what I will, I guess, continue to go through, you don't have to talk, but get out from underneath your doona and spend some time with your family. I think family is really important. Don't hide yourself from the world. It doesn't help. And also, you're not alone. You feel like you are, but you've got people that love you and you can't push them away. Utilise it. Yeah. You don't have to talk, you just gotta hang out with them, I guess. My mum's my best friend now because of it. I would also say don't listen to the voices. You are your own person.
Okay, that was episode 1.
Yeah. So Olive's story is about a teenage girl who struggled with mental health issues, and it was about her, I guess, coming to realise and understand what those issues were. I think Fred and I sort of made this as the first one in the mental health series as a proof of concept to show that, I think what we feel is that by making films that talk about social issues that people don't talk about all the time, we actually bringing to the forefront and into the community issues that people don't understand how to discuss and people don't understand how to deal with. So that was our idea with Olive.
Well, and also, I guess, developing the artwork, it's a mixed media piece. So it's a combination of painting, a little bit of digital art as well. We also used various bits of types of animation in there. So when you do see the film, I guess you'll notice that it's not of a style that you would recognise. It's definitely unique in its own way. And that's what we try and do with each and every episode as well.
Yes, but I think a really important part of Woven Thread's concept is that each film is like an artwork. And the idea behind that was that these artworks actually draw people into the story. And by creating these really visually beautiful stories, people are able to leave behind any kind of preconceived notions that they have about that particular subject matter or any problems that they may find in relating to the story. But it actually allows them to be drawn in and actually, I think, listen and hear what the content of that story is so much more.
I think it's also, I think for those who aren't familiar with the animation process as well, each minute takes about a week to do, roughly, from our experience. And it depends on how many people are working on it. But if you've only got like 1 or 2 people working on it, it could take up to a minute a week. So each episode could take up to 6 weeks. That's not including the filming, not including the interview, not including the planning and all of that part of it. This is just the animation part and just the creation of the artworks. So I think that's definitely it's definitely a labour-intensive project. Each episode is very labour-intensive, but it's also a lot of fun as well.
And it's really important. I think Fred and I both get a lot of satisfaction out of going through that process and seeing, where we started off and then where we end up with the film and the final kind of, the final sort of edition of it. I think we often sort of get into the middle point, and now we look at it and sort of go, it's going to be okay, it'll be okay, because once we've put all of our beautiful textured layers and once we've done this and we've done that, then it's going to be, as beautiful as we know that it can eventually get to. Not to say that the artworks aren't great on their own, but the look that we're looking for, the feel that we've tried to create in each one is an individual artwork in itself. I think one of the things we forgot to mention at the beginning, Fred, was that we actually used Olive's artwork. So in the scene where there's the scribbles on the page and the words and the little drawings, they are actually Olive's artworks.
They're actually her drawings, yeah. And
that was a question that I had, is how much of your own work is in there, and other sort of sources, like what inspires you, or what is the bits of the text that you're picking up on to animate? Like, how do you make that decision of what visuals to use? I guess where's that coming from?
Well, I guess it sort of starts with me, I suppose. I guess I find that through going through the process of cutting the story together, I start to get a visual sense of how I see it and how it flows. And then I just start to jot down ideas and drawings about that. And then once I've sort of got drawings for the whole film, then Fred and I sit down and sort of work through that. And, sometimes they stay the same. Sometimes we develop them on to something else, or we work out a way to make things work. But I guess I generally find that they kind of come to me over time, just hearing the story over and over again, because it takes me a while. The interviews are usually about an hour long to 2 hours, and I cut that down to 4 minutes. And so that is actually quite a challenging process for me. I always say to Fred, I think this one has to be a little bit longer. But we eventually get it down to 4.5 minutes, which is really where we need to be.
Sometimes Michi has got it down to like 7 minutes, 8 minutes, and then she says, "Oh, what do you think?" And then I just go in there and just go snip, 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 and we just start.
Sometimes you've used literal words. Sometimes it's more imagination, isn't it? Sometimes they're actually things that she's describing, but sometimes you've used your own kind of where it takes you.
Yes, but I think a lot of the time that actually comes out of the interview as well, because when you spend that much time talking to somebody, which is usually I spend a couple of hours talking to someone beforehand, and then there's the couple of hours that you do the interview, and so there's a lot of information that you kind of gather about that person. I have to be honest though, this is actually a story about my daughter. So I lived this experience. So the visuals were partly, I suppose, influenced by the experience that I had of living through somebody who appeared to have, nothing wrong, and then all of a sudden things started to go terribly wrong and nobody really knowing or understanding what was happening. So through that process, there were a lot of visual ideas that came from that process as well.
That must have been quite challenging as well. I'm curious then how much the subject gets involved in that final way in which they're being portrayed, like how much is that a conversation with them as well?
They actually, they leave the process once they share their story, and they trust us to do the rest. So we always, once the story is cut together, then I always send it to whoever it was and ask them to approve the cut version of it. And then they don't get to see it until we've finished with all of the visuals. Yeah. And I think that is actually a good thing, because usually they are always incredibly happy with the end result and surprised and excited by what they see.
I think there seem to be some questions in the chat here. Somebody's saying, how do you get to meet the interviewees? Like, where has that come? What's that connection you've made with people?
Well, I guess when we first set out to do a project, so with this mental health project, we start by sort of trying to work out what kind of stories we think are going to make the most impact. And then we reach out to organisations who support those people. So often stories come through those organisations. So for instance, one of our stories is about Hannah, who has an eating disorder. And we reached out to End Ed House of Hope, which is an organisation on the Sunshine Coast, which does amazing work with people with eating disorders. And so her story came from there. Pete the farmer actually came from us talking to the local politicians and them knowing about him and his issues, and they sort of pointed us towards Pete. So that's how we found Pete. But generally it comes from reaching out to people in those areas. And
should we watch the next one, Kiki? Or would you like to say anything more, Fadle? I
think the the most interesting thing about that is about this film for me was just getting into this zone of it in different scenes, and I think and having fun with the interpretation of Michi's storyboards as well, because when she storyboards it, she does a great job, by the way, Michi. I mean, I'm not saying it's terrible, okay, but I do go through it. She portrays her vision, and then basically what I do is I extend that even further. And sometimes, we might look at something, it's working really well, or it's, we rework it together. It's a bit of a synergy between different artists, and I think that's probably the way it works. That's why it works so well with us.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, and we're very good at pushing each other. So, like I'll have an idea, and then Fred will sort of have an idea, and then we'll kind of put it together, and then it'll be like, oh, but you could do this, and he's like, oh, we can't do that. And then it's like, where he goes, but we could do this, and and it's sort of, and everything, it develops, and I think we always end up getting really beautiful results.
Yeah, and sometimes it could end up being, on that almost 100% where you think it's finished, and then somebody or one of us will mention something, and then suddenly we've got to go back and just make those changes, and just because it's going to capture the right moment, and that's pretty much how it goes in every film. So.
I was interested in your process again too, Fadle, in terms of, is this the first time you've been like taking watercolor painting into an animation, or have you worked in that way before?
No, I've done it before, especially mixed media. My first proper animation was actually plasticine many years ago, and I was just messing with it and sort of capturing on a computer for the first time, when computers first started doing that, and then putting on drawn or digitally created backgrounds. And sometimes, I'd draw them, scan them, cut them out, and create depth. And then back then it was a lot harder to do. And so that's where, for me, that's where it started. And I think, Michi, you've had some experimentation with that before, have you? Or as you developed the series, I think you were messing around with it as well, of course.
Yeah, look, as we developed the series, we sort of tried a variety of different sort of things. Sometimes we'd use paper elements that we moved around, and sort of and other kind of real live elements that we sort of brought into a combination of drawing.
I think I saw a bit of video when she jumps in the pool, and that was real video, wasn't it?
That was real video, yes.
Yes.
The jumping in the pool was real video, but we wanted it to feel like it was a painting as well.
Or a memory,
Yeah.
So, sorry, what were you going to say?
Go ahead, sorry. What I was going to say was also, like, you'll notice that there's some stop motion elements also in the film. Some of them is where she talks about her jumpers in the beginning of the film, where you see the paper cutouts. They were actually animated on one large floor, and then added on in the video in the animation afterwards. So it's just little elements like that.
Yeah, and sometimes if we think about it, like if we actually get it, we will often get the person who's telling the story to walk a sequence or to do an action. So, for instance, Olive throws the jumpers, and we captured that on a camera. So it's sort of like a stop motion. And then we sort of had the frames to be able to paint, to be able to get that nice feel of stop motion.
Yeah.
I'm Peter Capel, and I live on a property Bungalla at Manila, which is 20 kilometres west of Manila, just north of Keeper Dam. When I was a little boy, I was just Dad's shadow. Wherever Dad was, I wanted to be. Going to the yards, mustering stock, checking waters. If I could pull a bit of wire on a fence, I was happy doing that. Something I grew up with, and I liked it, and it's all I ever wanted to do. It was a fun place as a kid to grow up. The drought started for us here late 2017. We got very little crop because it was a very dry finish, and we started feeding livestock early in 2018, and that hasn't stopped. We're now at the start of 2020. The sheep have been fed every week since then. And we're trying to keep the production going, try and have some country ready to sow some crop into if we get lucky enough to get rain to do it. The personal toll has probably been every day you wake up and you're thinking, how long is this going to go? Are we going to make it out of this? We've got the ways and means to do it. If rain doesn't come soon, are we going to be able to keep the program going as it is? You're thinking along and you get frustrated at times. You're thinking you probably take that out on your loved ones a little. You might lose a temper or something at some small little thing and it seems insignificant, but it seems to grow into something, I don't know. Probably going through 2018, it was a tough winter. This mountain was starting to grow in front of me. I wondered whether I was ever going to get over the other side of it. And as we went through into the spring, I thought the problem was starting to get worse. The hurdle was just getting higher and higher and higher. It wasn't raining and, just getting anxious about what was going on. And I wasn't sleeping. You'd wake up, you'd try and think, how are we going to get through this? When's the rain coming? How much feed have I got on hand? How much should I be feeding? I mean, you'd start going around all these little situations. Wouldn't let you go to sleep, so you'd turn the TV on and watch something boring. You'd hope you'd have a doze for a while. It'd go on and on and on and on. And you'd be getting tighter, and as you get tighter, your decision-making becomes very cloudy. Build up and build up and build up, and you get more anxious because you don't know why you're doing it. It seemed to be getting very difficult. My wife, Lou, is a tower of strength. She's an enormously positive person, super optimistic. She'd say, you should go and see someone and talk to them. I said, well, how are they going to help me? I couldn't really see how some help could make me see things clearer. I didn't have a broken arm. You can fix a broken arm, you can fix things, but the mental thing, I thought, how can they fix that? I couldn't make a decision about how we were going to do things, and I couldn't do this, and I was kicking the stones. And we knew a bloke, he'd been in a situation. I said to Lou, Pete's really struggling. A few years ago, I got into a battle and it nearly broke me mentally, and I went and saw the doctor. And his story sounded so similar to ours. He had some problems and the mountain got too high for him. Went and did something about it, and it just sounded so close to home. I thought, well, why don't I go and talk to the doctors? And he gave me some depression, anxiety medication. It's your body chemistry that you're lacking a bit of something in, and these tablets seem to fix the balance. There's nothing wrong with you, it's just the product to keep you thinking and happy. It was basically days. This great weight seemed to be lifted off my shoulders, and all of a sudden I could see a much brighter picture. The mountain became a hill. We've got visions to do stuff and move forward. Before I was on this medication, the future was tomorrow. I think moving through this 2.5 years of drought, it's actually taught us a whole lot about animal production. We can do it, but we need Mother Nature to help us to make it. I look at it and think we've got a wonderful future here with the boys. We can do some great things here, and it's been happy days ever since.
Okay.
Well, that beautiful, beautiful landscape is Fred's painting, and it is just. I think it's so. I haven't watched that film again for a really long time, but it is so beautiful. You just captured the red earth and the dry and the, and that feeling of drought so well, I think.
That sort of comes from being out in the bush too, and travelling different parts of Australia and seeing what it's like out there when it's drought, and experiencing the heat and experiencing what it's like out there. But I did actually bring some pictures of the elements. It's probably not the sharpest image, but there's Pete. That's how he was painted from that beginning scene, and then it was each element was then put together with Pete and the background and mountains and landscapes and everything else. And when that drought scene came, we painted trees, you know, with leaves, without leaves, and it's a bit of a process. And when you think about it, by the time you paint it, and by the time you scan it, and by the time you cut it out in Photoshop and then post it on there, this is what makes the images work so well. And then you got a trial and error with different layers and different processes. And sometimes we look at it and we say, oh, it looks too clean, or it looks, you know, it doesn't feel organic enough, or too digital. And I think
we need to paint this, and one of us will run over to the table with the paints and the, you know, and start painting another tree or another bush or something that we can put in.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, you look at it and you go, I don't know if that's going to work. Then it's not until you lay it in and you go, oh wow, that worked better than I thought. And sometimes the simplest movements as well. The movement is another thing that, you know, you have to constantly think about. How's it going to move on screen, and how much movement are we going to have? You know, if something's moving just like a commercial animation, like the ones that you see, let's say on Pixar and all of that, they look great, but you know, this is more painterly, and
it is painterly, and it's actually quite dreamlike. Like, what's speaking to me is, I think the voices are so strong, so you don't have to separate the visual from the audio. The audio is speaking to you. The story is really strong, but this is almost like a dreamlike, imaginary world that doesn't take you one doesn't detract from the other. They speak really beautifully to each other, and it's like a dream sequence to me. It's just beautiful. So yeah. You're getting lots of great responses too in the chat, going there. Films are mesmerizing, produced with heart and passion, and sending an important and meaningful message. So I think it is talking to lots of people out there.
That 5-minute interview is really just a taste of a much larger interview too. I mean, I came in on the second series I was more involved in the filming of it, but I got to experience the whole interview, and hearing that interview and hearing those stories, and then cutting some of that really great stuff that is really heartfelt out, and keeping what is the most important parts of that story, because you only have a few minutes to tell it, and it really doesn't do the whole story justice. But it is difficult to do.
It is, and I think everybody's so generous. I think that's one of the really interesting aspects that we've come across, is that everybody that shares their story is incredibly generous with their honesty and their openness and their will to try and help other people. Basically, they all want to share their story in the hope that they will give someone else hope, and that that their journey will somehow help other people's journeys.
Yes. Has it been used in that way in institutions now? Like, are you using it as an educational tool?
We are. So the first series has been in schools through the Australian Children's Television Foundation, and now ClickView also have it. We're about to create an Atom Teacher's Guide for the first series. The second series is on ClickView, and that's available to primary schools, high school and tertiary institutions as well, and that has an Atom Teacher's Guide with it as well. And that's been a big focus for us, because we really feel that change happens in young people, and if we can get young people to understand this, like, well, for instance, with mental health, if young people can understand the signs of mental health and what it looks like, then there's more chance of them being able to either acknowledge it in themselves or see it in friends, or people around them, family. And if we can get that education in at a young age, then we've got much more possibility of changing the way that people look at mental health.
There was another question about how you seem to work really well with each other. How did you find each other?
Well, we talked about that before when we started, yes, but I was working with another animator who did a whole lot of sort of a different style of animation, and I think that this work is quite labour intensive and was probably a little bit too, he was just a one man show, and he introduced me to Fred, and then Fred and I sort of met, and it's been fantastic. As I said to Fred, it's really great because my drawings can get worse and worse as we go, because you just understand what's going on in my mind. And, I draw a circle like this, and it's like, can't you imagine the whole thing's just flying around? And Fred's like, yes, I can see it. So.
I on that note, there's a question saying, for Fadle, how do you take a watercolor on paper and put a scene together? Do you film the watercolor, cut it out, and then make it into a collaging and editing program? So this is a more technical process.
Yeah, on some of those, on some of the earlier ones especially, actually on all of them, we were actually taking photographs of the high-res photographs, sometimes almost up to 100 megapixels of some of the photos, because when they're really small, and we need to zoom in really close, or the camera needs to fly past them, quite often you need that detail in it.
Yeah.
And you want to capture every brush stroke, and you've got to have light sort of coming in from the side so that it's well illuminated.
Yeah.
And so by the time you set that up, take a photo. Sometimes the photo doesn't align, so you got to really sort of make it work. Quite often I'll take 3 or 4 photos of the same artwork, bring it in, and then pick the best one out of the lot and cut it out, and then work out, okay, what's going to be transparent? Is it going to be fully transparent, or is it going to be a little bit opaque, or pick the elements that are sort of, and work out what the edges are going to do in the artwork as well. Sometimes you don't want hard edges all the time, and so you got to work. I need to experiment sometimes and think, okay, what sort of edge are we going to have on the person? Mm-hmm. Most of the time, there's a little bit of a soft edge, and trees and grass are a little bit more difficult to do in these sort of software, in 2D especially, if you want it to sway a little bit in the wind. So there's a little bit more of a process in those as well.
Complex, isn't it?
Yeah, and quite often, like I think that opening shot of Pete when he comes in on that farm, I think there was about 50 different layers on there at least. Some of it was grass, some of it was fence, trees. There's a barn somewhere. There's different depth of grass, and so once you go through all of that, and at one point the camera flew through there and something didn't work, so I had to rework it a little bit more. And at one point Pete didn't look so great, and Michi pointed that out, and back to the drawing board on Pete, and so he looked sort of too stiff, so we tweaked him. Yeah.
Yes, he developed to be quite a lot more handsome than he was in the first show.
You slimmed him down considerably.
Yeah.
So people can see these films online now, potentially?
Yes, so at the moment the refugee series is on our website, which is woventhreads.co, and the mental health series is currently on Pedestrian TV, and the links for that are also on our website. And in November, the mental health series will start on SBS.
Oh, fabulous.
It'll be available there. It'll be screened broadcast, but it will also be on demand as well.
Wonderful. Oh, that's so exciting. We've just shared some of those links with everybody who's online now, and we'll promote that as well. And what are your plans is there more in the pipeline? Are you going to do more of the same?
There is more in the pipeline. We really feel that we haven't actually been able to do enough with the mental health series, so we'd like to do more. But currently, we are working with Lifeline to produce some work for them, and we've also in the process of getting an Indigenous series together. So we're sort of in the early stages of the Indigenous series. But we do have, at the moment, some very important research that we're doing with Black Dog Institute to measure the impact of these films on people. And it would be really amazing if anybody was interested in actually completing the research, if they did that and shared it with people that they know, because that's going to be really helpful for us in terms of making sure that the films are constantly relevant to the groups that we're trying to reach. And I think one of the other things that's important to mention is that these films are for people who suffer from mental health, and for people to be able to share their experience, for people to be able to feel less isolated when they're experiencing it, but also very much for the community to have some insight and understanding and be able to approach somebody, and maybe be more comfortable to sit with them in them, and with their mental health challenges, or maybe just ask them if they're okay.
Yep. I think especially when you've talked about stigma, I think definitely in certain culturally diverse communities there is more stigma and more shame around it as well. Have you had diversity in the kind of people you're representing? Like, I haven't looked at, I know you did a whole refugee series, but what about in the mental health one?
We have, so we always look for, we always try and make it as diverse as possible. So we try and have, a variety of men, women, whether if any, of all genders. We had people who identified as LGBT, QI. We did an Indigenous story. So we try and be as inclusive as we possibly can. And one of the interesting stories that we've actually got coming up that's about to be released is a story on Osher Gunsberg, who is the Bachelor, the presenter on The Bachelor.
Okay.
And I think his story is very interesting because I think everybody sees a reality TV personality as somebody whose life is very, looks perfect. You see them and you think that everything's perfect. But he suffers from an incredibly, I don't know if there are different levels of OCD, but a very debilitating level of OCD. And the work that he does every day to be able to go out and do his job or to leave his house is huge. And the fact that he's willing to share that, I think, is fantastic, because it just shows people that you can do it. No matter how hard it is, you can find ways to put in the work to make it possible to go out and make the most of life, as challenging as it is.
Yeah, his story was really, really good. I really enjoyed, that process of listening to his interviewing for, and I think when the film is released, definitely look out for that one. It's an interesting story, and the visuals are obviously different again on this episode as well, with a completely different artist on doing the artwork. Well, it's the same animation team, or similar animation team.
Do you get any government support for your funding for your films?
We got government. We generally get. So on this series we got some support from Screen Australia, but New South Wales government actually supported. They supported. Jet. Yes, the episode about Jet, which is a beautiful episode about a boy who is LGBTQI, and it's about his experience of growing up and his friendship. The dancer.
Yeah, I thought that was beautiful too.
Yeah, so it's really beautiful. I think one of the interesting things about, about when you start to tell people with mental health, challenges, their stories, there are so many different elements that feed into each other. So nobody has one single, single issue, because in a sense, everything kind of builds up and then leads to whatever it is. But Jet's story is beautiful, and just his realization that, who he is. So, yeah, so that was New South Wales government. They actually sponsored that whole episode. So that was amazing.
I'm not sure there's any other questions at this point. So unless you wanted to share anything more about future directions, I think it's just been really, really a very wonderful coming together of, something that's a really important issue that we all need to take responsibility for at some level and probably experience in some way through people who connect with us, but also this way in which artists and, creatives actually can tell that story in a really special way, I think, that's quite unique. And so
I think it's definitely a unique way of telling it. I mean, when you think animated documentary, this is not always what comes to mind. And there are other animated documentaries, but they're also different. And it's definitely, being able to find that niche is really, really, really amazing, and it's amazing to work on something like that. So,
well, I think it's been really rewarding, don't you think, Fred? I mean, I think for both, I think Fred and I are both creative people. I love the fact that Fred's so creative. It just makes the process of what we're doing so much more exciting, and it constantly is pushing things to another level. And but I know personally for me to be able to use my creativity in a way that has the possibility of helping people and making a difference is incredibly rewarding. And and it feels like there's a really positive purpose for what we're doing.
I think on this last screening of the refugee series, Olive actually just walks out of the crowd because she had seen the films, and she pointed at me and she said, "I want you to make my film." And when she did that, I was like, "Oh no, how am I going to do that justice?" And what if she doesn't like it? And obviously things go in your mind, and you think, and what sort of work should it be? And I think in the end, she was really happy with it. So I think it worked out. Yeah.
Yeah, you did a beautiful job.
You're always thinking about the person who's telling the story, and you think,
yes,
how's that going to work?
Be authentic, and true.
So far, it's been pretty good so far. So
you had a good response so far. Yes. Yeah. I always have the same feeling as well as we're watching it. Oh, I hope they like it. Oh, do you think they're going to be upset about that? Oh, it doesn't really look like them, but it's not meant to look like them. Yeah,
it doesn't. It's not meant to look perfectly like them, and that's the whole idea of this. And I think setting that expectation from the very beginning that's not what the series is about. It's a visual impression of the story. And
congratulations to both of you. It's been really lovely to share. And there's one more message here. You've done a series on refugees and mental health. We seem to have lots of groups for being left behind. What future plans for other communities? But I think you described the Indigenous one is coming as well.
Yes, and there are a lot of other things. We'd like to do homelessness. We'd like to look at homelessness. We'd like to look at people who are living with illnesses that are incurable illnesses. We'd like to, there's a lot of plans.
A lot of different stories to tell. Yeah.
Good luck for everything that's coming up in the future, and thank you for sharing so much today.